Hello and welcome to the Fifth Down Huddle. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe to the channel whenever you please. Thank you for tuning in, and let's huddle up right away. I've got a big episode here. So, over this next week, I'm going to be finishing Jameis Winston's film review, which means I'm going to watch I have already finished up to week 5 of this past season. And I'm going to continue every single snap that Jameis Winston played over the next week. I'm going to finish the entire regular season. And the whole point of that video is kind of going to be to answer the question of whether or not Jameis Winston is a solid starting quarterback right now. And really whether or not he should be given a starting role before this next season begins. Or at least even a chance to have a starting role. Or if he is just a complete bust. But that either one will be a part of next week's episode if I find a way to shorten down my predictions. Because here today I'm doing AFC playoff predictions. You probably got that by the title, but I'm doing AFC playoff predictions. What that means is I'm going to predict the record of the team and where they stand in the playoffs. And my main trade-off for that is kind of the free agency period is still on technically. But the majority of the notable free agent signings and trades are completed up to this point. So I'm going to base a lot of these changes from last year based on what has gone on in free agency. There have been some big-time free agency moves that I think will big-time affect these teams. So we're going to start out with the AFC today. Now, each week, past Jameis Winston's film review and past the NFC predictions and Jameis Winston's film review, I would try to fit into a 30-minute period next week. I'll try my absolute best. But if I can't, then after those two things are over, each week I'm going to go over each team of a division's year predictions, such as games won, lost. Go over the entire schedule, the quarterback stats, how they're going to do in the playoffs, if they make the playoffs, etc. So this is going to be a more detailed prediction. Because right now this is just kind of a general prediction of what their record will be. I don't really go over how the players will do, besides mainly a general thought process of how I think the quarterbacks will do, or how a few new additions might help the team or hurt the team. But other than that, right now I'm just really going to be doing a kind of short stid for each team in the AFC. So here we go with my first predictions episode of the offseason. Now I'm going to start out with the AFC North. I believe the Ravens will have a 14-2 record. Now if you look at the offseason moves, really their biggest offseason move that was really, really notable, they made a lot of re-signings, so they kept a lot of the same guys around. They still have Lamar Jackson, still have Mark Ingram, still have Hollywood Brown, still have a lot of those good players on offense. And they traded for defensive end Calais Campbell. So I believe that the Ravens will boost up to 14-2. They had a solid year last year, and I think it's going to continue this year. Seems as though Lamar Jackson did not hit a sophomore slump. And honestly, I only think his passing ability is going to get better, and I think he's going to continue to learn how to use his legs. We saw last year his legs are insane, and they can make anyone miss. And I think that's going to continue into this next season. I have the Ravens at 14-2, winning the AFC North. Now moving on to the Browns. The Browns are going to be disappointing. They signed Austin Hooper, tight end. They signed a nice offensive tackle and Jack Conklin. Case Keenum, just to give Mayfield a little competition. Now they signed 2 safeties, Carl Joseph and Andrew Sendejo. They signed Andrew Billings, which is a D tackle. They signed cornerback Kevin Johnson. They had a lot of players, but not really a lot of superstars. They got a lot of good, solid starters. And I like that. But I do think that the downfall of this team is going to be Baker Mayfield. I simply believe that that is what is going to kill this team. Now, mind you, I might be wrong. The Browns might really turn it around, and maybe this new offensive coordinator is really, or head coach even, is really, really going to help the Browns, and maybe they become a playoff team. But where it stands right now after last season, I simply do not trust that a head coaching position takes them from where they were last year to where they can be a playoff team. I simply don't see that happening. I could be wrong, but I simply don't see that happening. Now I have the Steelers at 4-12, another disappointing team. They signed fullback Derek Watt, an offensive lineman in Stefan Wisniewski. They signed Eric Ebron and Chris Wormley. But again, the same problem stands with the Steelers. They don't have a solid quarterback. They got Duck Hodges, Mason Rudolph, but really neither of them showed up as being a solid starter that they can rely on throughout the season. I feel like they're just going to have a really down year. I feel like they might draft a solid quarterback, but again, I don't think they're going to draft anyone who can get them above 4-12 in their rookie year. But yeah, that's where I have the Steelers, third in the AFC North. And dead last come the Bengals yet again. They signed DJ Reader, he's a D-tackle. They signed Trey Wayne, signed Von Bell, and a few more lower additions. But again, I think the biggest story here in the AFC North, besides the Ravens, is the quarterback position. I do feel as though the quarterback position will be the death of them. And I feel like pushing Joe Burrow into a starting role is something the Bengals would do. Sadly, I feel like that's something they would do. Now, they do still have their starter that has been their starter for a good while before. But I do believe that if that starter doesn't do that good, they're going to push Joe Burrow in. I just really feel like they're the organization to do that. Them or the Redskins are the type of team to just force someone in because they need money. They need ticket sales. They need people to tune into the games. And if Joe Burrow is going to get them to that, despite whether or not he's ready to win games, I guarantee you they do it. I guarantee you they do it. And it's sad. It really is. But you got to remember, the NFL is a business. They've got people trying to make money. And if putting Joe Burrow in early is going to help them get more money, then expect him to do it. Just expect him to do it. I mean, I will not be surprised if it happens. Now, move on to the AFC East. This is an interesting division. A lot of changes. The Bills, I have winning the division at 10-6. Not a very strong division this year. They signed Josh Norman, Quentin Spain, who's a guard, A.J. Klein, linebacker, Mario Addison, Quentin Jefferson, Vernon Butler, and they also traded for Stephon Diggs. They added a lot of solid talent, a great receiver in Stephon Diggs to help Josh Allen. But yet again, the quarterback in Josh Allen, I don't completely trust him yet. He showed a lot of fizzling in that playoff game, a lot of downside in terms of pressure, and I feel like the pressure is really going to be on him this year to turn it around and put up a high-powered team because he has Stephon Diggs now. And a lot of people are going to say, look, you got Stephon Diggs, they got you a big-time receiver, they got you an O-lineman. Put it together, man. And I do believe he's going to put it together enough to have a decent seed in the playoffs. But outside of that, I don't believe they'll go far in the playoffs. But I do believe they will win the AFC East. They're a solid team. Josh Allen's a solid quarterback. I believe in him long-term. But I don't know if he's ready to make, a 12-4, 13-3 Super Bowl run in his third year. Now, after the Bills, you have the Patriots at 9-7. They had a lot of losses. They lost Tom Brady, arguably, in my eyes, the best quarterback of all time. They lost Kyle Van Noy, one of their best linebackers. They lost both their linebackers. They also lost Jamie Collins, which, again, is the other linebacker. They lost Nate Ebner, the safety. They lost Philip Dorsett, which, honestly, Philip Dorsett wasn't really a loss because he didn't do much at all last season. And they lost D-tackle Danny Shelton. They lost linebacker Landon Roberts. And the only people they added was Demir Beard, who is a wide receiver who has never really proved himself to be much better than a fourth or third string wide receiver at best. Bu Allen, a D-tackle. Adrian Phillips, who's a solid safety, but I don't think he's going to be really anything special. And Danny Vitale, fullback, which I'm guessing is to help them move on from Landon Roberts, seeing as we really don't know if their current fullback is going to be ready by next season, and Brandon Copeland, the linebacker. Now, the only reason I have them at 9-7, because they suffered so many losses, is because they have Bill Belichick. And not only that, but they have a Bill Belichick with something to prove. That's special. That's something you got to keep an eye on. Bill Belichick has something to prove. Brady left. The trio is over. No more Kraft, Brady, Belichick. It's over. Brady's on his own. Belichick's on his own. Who is going to prove that the credit goes to them? Now, I don't know if that is their entire want. I think they're honestly just two guys who want to win games. But there's a little bit of chip on Belichick's shoulder, I assure you, that says, all right, Kraft, I wanted to trade Brady to San Francisco 2 years ago. Kraft said no because it was all about Brady. It's always been about Brady. All right, well, I'm going to show Kraft and I'm going to show the world that I can win myself because he hasn't really done that before. He really hasn't. I mean, he went to a Super Bowl before the Patriots, but he was never a head coach. Never won a Super Bowl as a head coach without Brady. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Bill Belichick can do. I think it's possible that they have a higher ceiling than that. I think their ceiling is, 11-5, 12-4. But just with that talent, I really don't know how high Belichick is going to be able to improve the players that they have. Belichick always seems to sneak into the playoffs with a really, really low roster. And it's going to be interesting to see if he can do it without his man Brady. And now after the Patriots, you have the Dolphins at 5-11. They signed Michael Roberts, who's a tight end, safety Clayton Fagellum, Eric Flowers, offensive guard, Kyle Van Noy from the Patriots, Ed Shaq Lawson, cornerback Byron Jones, center Ted Karras, edge Emmanuel Ogbah, Jordan Howard, and Landon Roberts. So they got a lot of additions, really had a lot of great additions. Now obviously a lot of great signings, but again, no solid quarterback yet. I do believe that either they're going to get Tua or they're going to get Burrow if they can find an amazing trade with the Bengals. But what I am interested for is more the 2021 season than this upcoming season for the Dolphins. Because they're getting a lot of talent on this team. They're building. They have the coach. They're getting the talent. Now this year, get the quarterback. Develop him over the season. They won't do terrible, but they're not going to, again, a fresh quarterback, a lot of new faces. They're not going to be a solid team enough to make the playoffs. But look for 2021. They could very well be a powerhouse team. Then last in the AFC East, you go to the New York Jets. Offseason moves, they got Brian Poole, cornerback, Connor McGovern, a center, Brashad Perriman, kind of an okay wide receiver, George Fant, offensive tackle, and Greg Van Roten, an O-lineman. Now, I love the O-line additions, but I feel like the Jets will fall off after starting somewhere near 2-2 or 3-3. But I feel like the team simply doesn't have a good coach. They just don't, nor a great quarterback. I'm all for their quarterback, man, but I feel like he's going to see ghosts. He's going to keep seeing ghosts, and the Jets simply are not going to have a good season next year. I just don't believe they will. I think the quarterback and the coaching position is going to be the death of them. Then we move on to the AFC South, easily the strongest division in the AFC this coming year is, in my eyes. The Texans will have a 12-4 record. Now, they had a big notable loss in DeAndre Hopkins. Really did. But they got Brandon Cooks and they got David Johnson. Now, not a ton worth it, as they lost more than they got. And David Johnson hasn't really been all up and at him lately. And Brandon Cooks is no DeAndre Hopkins. But, I do believe that they still have a solid team. They still do. And I do believe that they have a very well ability to reach a 12-4 record. I see it very possible with that team. A lot of people are freaking out that DeAndre is gone, but they got Brandon Cooks. They have another deep threat. That's not gone. They still got Will Fuller, still got Brandon Cooks. Now, they don't have a DeAndre Hopkins. I know. I get it. I get that that's scary. I get that that's bad. But the simple fact that they got Brandon Cooks back, I think, really lowers how bad that DeAndre Hopkins loss is going to kill them. So then you move on to second in the AFC South, and it's the Jaguars at 9-7. And I like the offensive coordinator firing, and I believe Minshew Mania will continue. And they gained Cassius Marsh at linebacker, and they gained cornerback Rashawn Melvin, Tyler Eifert. I feel like Minshew's second year will be the year for him to jump forward into a solid 9-7 season. And then we move on to third. And this is interesting because the Titans will make the playoffs, but they only make it because of the 7-team playoffs now. If it weren't for the 7-team playoffs, I don't believe that the Titans would make it. They will have a 9-7 record, I believe. Now, they kept a lot of the same team around, didn't make too many big-name new signings, and I feel like a season worth of film, later, I feel like teams will find a better way to force the Titans to throw the ball a lot more often, and Tannehill just got a lot of money. Often in football history, when you pay out the for a quarterback who is not super proven, and they didn't pay out the butt for him, but they did pay him a lot of money, more than anyone would have thought Ryan Tannehill would be getting 2 years ago. They usually don't do too well following. And it'll be interesting to see, but I honestly don't think Ryan Tannehill is going to be able to do that well next year, and I don't believe that Derrick Henry is going to continue to be as dominant. The Colts are 5-11 and last. They got a good boost to the D-line in Buckner, but I don't feel like Rivers or Brissett will be able to get the job done. I feel like Rivers, he's really not, didn't show a lot of promise last year, threw a lot of interceptions, and frankly, he's old. And I don't think Brissett is much of a better option than Rivers, and I just don't feel like Rivers is going to be able to adapt to a whole new team quick enough to be able to put up a good season. I say 5-11. I don't think they'll be able to get the job done in the quarterback position. Then we move on to the final division in the AFC, the AFC West, with the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs at number 1. They didn't make too many big-time offseason gains, and they did suffer a few losses, but I do believe the team will stay around the same level of wins and losses for the second year in a row. They just won a Super Bowl. They feel on top of the world. They still got Mahomes and arguably the best offense in the league. They didn't really lose any big-time pieces from that offense. I believe that offense will stick at the top, and that will be what carries them to a 13-3 record. I have the Chargers at 5-11, the second in the AFC West. It's interesting. The Chiefs do great, but pretty much every other team in the AFC West does pretty bad. And the Chargers sit at 5-11. In terms of the offseason moves, they traded for Trey Turner. They re-signed Eckler, franchised Hunter Henry, the tight end. Signed Beluga, O-tackle. They signed Linval Joseph, a D-tackle. They signed Chris Harris Jr., a cornerback. Made lots of nice additions, but again, and I'll recap about why I'm so focused on these quarterbacks at the end of the episode, but I don't love the idea of Tyrod Taylor starting. I really, really, really don't. We've seen Tyrod Taylor start in the past. He's nobody special. Based on what we've seen, he can't seem to sustain long-term success. And I feel like he'll have a good start to the season. Again, maybe a 2-2, 3-2, 4-3 type of start. But then it's really going to fall apart moving into the season. Now the Raiders followed them at 5-11. They signed Corey Littleton, Nick Kwiatkowski, I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's a linebacker. Eli Apple, Malik Collins, Jason Witten, and Nelson Aguilar. They got some nice moves defensively and a couple of okay offensive adds in Jason Witten and Nelson Aguilar. But similar to the Chargers and Broncos, I feel as though the quarterback position's uncertainty will ultimately mean the death of them. I just do. Now, going on to the Broncos, the last team in the AFC with the worst record, mind you, the second worst behind the Bengals at 4-12. They kept safety Justin Simmons. They traded for A.J. Boyd. They traded for Jarrell Casey. Signed an offensive lineman in Glasgow. They signed Melvin Gordon. Signed Shelly Harris. Signed Nick Vannett. Now, I like the additions, but I don't love the team overall. I do feel like Drew Lock will struggle in his sophomore season quite a bit. He had a really nice run in those. I think he went 4-1 going in as the starting quarterback to finish off the season, and that's really promising. I think Drew Lock has some real promise in the future, but I don't think he's there yet. I think that the pressure of starting out the season and the pressure that teams are going to put on him with some film to look at now is really going to hurt him. And I feel like the Broncos are really going to have a tough year this year. And I just don't see the Broncos doing much better than around the 4-12 to 6-10 range. I don't have their ceiling very, very high at all. I just don't. So then we move on to the last topic here before I talk about quarterbacks, the AFC playoff standings. At number 1, the Ravens, which is really the most important because they get a first-round bye. 2, the Chiefs. 3, the Texans. 4, the Bills. 5, the Patriots. 6, Jaguars. And 7th, Titans. So if I match this up here, that means the Chiefs will face off against the Titans, the Jaguars against the Texans, and the Patriots against the Bills. The Ravens move on to the first round. I have a drawing board here, so I'm going to kind of talk about it as I write it, just to help me think through this. The Chiefs against the Titans, I believe the Chiefs will steamroll the Titans. The Titans are only going to sneak in at the 7th seed, and I do not believe their offense will be good enough to boost past the Chiefs. So I have the Chiefs then moving up. I have the Texans against the Jaguars. I feel like something crazy will happen, and the Jaguars will surprise the Texans there, moving the Jaguars up. And then the Patriots against the Bills. I have the Bills beating the Patriots. So then the next 4 teams are the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Jaguars. So now you look at it as the Chiefs will then take on the Bills, and the Ravens will then take on the Jaguars. Now that week, I have the Ravens beating the Jaguars, and then I have the Chiefs beating the Bills, kind of a given there. And I have the Ravens against the Chiefs, the AFC Championship matchup everybody wants to see, and the Chiefs win again. The Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl for the 2nd year in a row. Their high-powered offense is what they ride all the way there. And then you'll have to wait till next week to see who they play against, just to make sure you tune in again. But yeah, that's what I see for the playoffs now. I'm going to talk to you now about why I'm so high up on quarterbacks. Why for the Raiders, for the Broncos, for the Chargers, for the Colts, for the Titans, for the Jets, for the Dolphins, for the Patriots, for the Bengals, for the Steelers, and for the Browns. Why I focused on the quarterback position so much as to why they would not succeed. The reason is the quarterback is something that the game basically runs through the quarterback. If the quarterback is not on, it brings down the rest of the team tremendously, more than any other position in the game. If the running back is not doing so hot one day, he fumbles twice, yes, that will bring down the team, but he can still throw the ball. Now, if the quarterback is completely falling apart, I mean, you can't just quit throwing the ball, because then they just blitz you every time, and all of a sudden running becomes easy. But my point is that a lot of the game relies on how good the quarterback is. I'm not saying the game runs through the quarterback. No, I kind of just said that. But what I meant by that is that a lot of pressure lies on the quarterback position. Meaning, if the quarterback is not in sync with the rest of the team, it becomes very, very hard for the team to succeed, and it puts a lot more effect on the team than I think any other position in the game does. I think we just see that time and time again. A lot of times the teams have a lot of talent. The Browns had a lot of talent in this past season, but Baker Mayfield didn't have a great year. He really didn't. He had a nice team, but he didn't have a good year. We've seen time and time again where teams have a lot of talent, but their quarterback just isn't there. He isn't. And it really ends up killing them. And that's why I focus on it so much, because a lot of teams get really high on all these new offseason additions, but the problem is, how good is a tight end if the quarterback can't throw it very well to him? How good is Odell Beckham if Baker Mayfield can't get it to his hands? You know? How good is Eric Ebron if Mason Rudolph can't throw it to him? That's my point, is that offensively, maybe not defensively, but offensively, it becomes very, very, very difficult to succeed if your quarterback is not good. And even so defensively, I mean, you look at the Buccaneers this past season, you look at them. I mean, a lot of people brought up the fact when everybody was talking, oh, Brady going to the Buccaneers, Super Bowl favorites now. Well, a lot of people brought up, worst points for a defense, worst points per game. They didn't have a very good point per game. Well, here's the problem. Jameis Winston threw over 30 interceptions. You know how hard that is to defend against? When it feels like at least 2 to 4 drives a game, your quarterback throws an interception. You know, of course, they gave up a lot of points, not to mention the pick sixes, but also it's hard to defend when the other team's starting on the 40-yard line, when they're starting on the 50, when they're starting on year 30. It becomes very, very difficult because your quarterback's throwing interceptions, giving them great field position. It's very, very, very difficult to defend against. And a lot of people bring up that point per game thing, and it's like, come on. You can't tell me that a lot of that doesn't fall on Jameis Winston. So thank God they got Jameis Winston out of there. Now I'll find out over the next week if Jameis Winston is good and if I shouldn't be saying that. But based on this past season, he is absolutely not good. And not good for that team at all. But yeah, those are my AFC predictions. I'm guessing that's exactly what you came here for because that will be the only thing in the title. But as I said at the beginning of the season, I'll recap it here. I'm going to be finishing Jameis Winston's film review over this next week. It'll be either a part of this next week's episode or the week after that. And then each week after, I'll be going over each division in the NFL rather than each conference. And I'll be going through games won/lost, meaning I'll go through the entire schedule and say, okay, Patriots play the Bills this week. The Patriots win. Rather than just, the Patriots are 9-7. Just to go deeper into it. And I'll also talk about the quarterback stats of each team, as well as how well they will do in the playoffs if they make it to the playoffs. So, thank you so much for tuning in. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching it there. If you're on Spotify, save me somewhere, especially if you enjoyed this episode, really only if you enjoyed this episode. Tune in any week. I post weekly, and I post daily on YouTube as much as I possibly can, depending on how much content that episode has. This episode, I will be posting it in shorter stints, probably around 16 separate videos of, this is what I think the Ravens will do, this is what I think the Browns will do, this is what I think the Steelers will do. Mainly because a lot of people, when they see this, they don't really want to watch the entire thing. I will put timestamps in the comment section below, but a lot of people just don't want to watch every single AFC team to get to their own. But if you are into that, then thank you for watching the entire video. But on YouTube, I will be posting separate teams. That just kind of gives you a taste of what I like to do. I like to record an entire episode and then post kind of the topics separately. Because I feel like it really just helps people to be able to tune in to really what they want to hear. Because, if you're a Dolphins fan and you want to know, what are the Dolphins going to do? Are they going to be good next year? Do I have to wait another year? Who are they going to draft? You might not want to listen to my spiel about the Dallas Cowboys and who I think is worth the money. That's just kind of what I mean, is I understand that you guys, you want to listen to certain things. You might want to not want to listen to this whole video. So I'm going to post the separate teams out there, just like I would any other video with the separate topics. And yeah, so watch my YouTube is probably going to be the best place to find that stuff, because Spotify and BuzzSprout at Fifth Down Huddle will all be full episodes. But again, on YouTube, it will be still at Fifth Down Huddle. But on YouTube, it will be the full episode as well as the smaller segments. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have an amazing Easter Sunday, which is when this will be posted. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next time. Thanks for huddling up.